What if I told you that for over 2,000 years, same-sex love in China wasn't hidden? It was normal. In fact, for more than 2,000 years, same-sex love was not only common, it was woven into the daily life of emperors, scholars, nobles, and artists. But how did a civilization so often seen as conservative become home to some of the most openly documented same-sex relationships in world history? And how did a culture that once celebrated these stories later turn them into secrets? To understand it, we need to go back to the earliest dynasties. In the Zhou dynasty 1046 to 256 BCE, love between men was regularly referenced in poetry. The classic of songs, one of China's oldest literary collections, includes verses describing deep affection between male companions, emotional bonds seen as noble rather than taboo. Relationships were tied to Confucian ideals of loyalty and devotion, especially between scholars and their male protégés. But the stories that truly shaped China's understanding of same-sex love emerged during the Warring States period. One of the most famous is the tale of Misi Shaya and the Duke of Wei. Their romance became legendary. The Duke adored Misi Shaya so deeply that when Misi Shaya once tasted a peach and offered the Duke the other half, it was celebrated as a symbol of pure affection. Centuries later, the passion of the cut peach became a poetic metaphor for male love across China, and the imperial courts took these relationships even further. During the Han dynasty, male favorites became powerful political figures. Emperor Ai famously fell in love with Dong Xian, elevating him rapidly through the ranks. Their intimacy was so well known that when Dong Xian fell asleep on the emperor's sleeve, Emperor Ai cut the sleeve off rather than wake him. From this came another lasting expression, the passion of the cut sleeve. For hundreds of years, this phrase became shorthand for same-sex love in Chinese literature. But the Han dynasty wasn't the exception. It was the blueprint. Dozens of emperors across multiple dynasties had male lovers. The Eastern Han, the Jin, the Northern Wei, the Liang, the Sui, the Tang, and even the Ming. Some rulers kept entire inner courts of handsome male courtiers, known for beauty, refinement, music, and poetry. And strangely, none of this was seen as unnatural. For most of ancient China, same-sex love was viewed as a matter of taste, not identity. A man could love men and still marry women, father children, and fulfill his family duties. Confucianism demanded lineage and discipline, but it never explicitly condemned same-sex relations. Buddhism and Taoism, both major influences, were largely indifferent to sexual behavior as long as spiritual balance was maintained. This meant that same-sex relationships were rarely moralized. Instead, they were simply part of life, honored in poems, depicted in stories, and accepted in the private lives of nobles and emperors. Yet the most surprising revelations come from literature of the late imperial era, where male-male romances appear in novels, plays, and operas. One Ming Dynasty novel describes the beauty of young male actors so vividly that it became a cultural trend. Wealthy men sponsoring performers who were both artists and companions. But what about women? Though less documented because women's lives were rarely recorded in general, there are hints. Tang and Song-era poetry contains references to intimate relationships between women in court life, especially within palace quarters where men were absent. Historical accounts describe noble women forming passionate emotional bonds, exchanging poetry and gifts, and even vowing lifelong devotion. Some Buddhist convents preserved letters implying deeper attachments between nuns who lived, prayed, and worked together for decades. So when did everything change? The shift happened surprisingly late, mainly during the 19th century, when Western influences and new moral frameworks entered China. Foreign ideas about sexuality, scene, and proper relationships began reshaping Chinese society. What had been normal became reframed as shameful. Stories of emperors and scholars with male lovers were downplayed or erased. By the early 20th century, the memory of China's long, complex history of same-sex relationships was almost forgotten. But the truth remained hidden in its literature, its idioms, its poetry, and its imperial records waiting to be rediscovered. For thousands of years, same-sex love was not a scandal in China. It was a part of life, a part of literature, a part of the imperial court, and a part of human history that reminds us that love, in all its forms, has always found a way. In the end, the story of homosexuality in ancient China isn't just about desire. It's about how societies remember and how they forget. and how the past often holds a far more complicated, beautiful truth than we expect.